What made Breaking Bad transformative wasn't just because it had such a good plot. I mean, a chemistry teacher decided to cook meth to secure his family's financial future, but slowly transformed into a ruthless drug lord. Excellent plot. But what really made Breaking Bad transformative was the show's commitment to describing that process. It didn't just show us how Walt slowly evolved into a ruthless drug lord. It described the process. We saw, felt, and experienced every bit of how Walt went from a chemistry teacher who was incredibly bad at being a criminal to a mastermind of crimes. That obsession with describing the process transformed television and bettered Vince Gilligan. Yet, despite how experiential Breaking Bad tried to be, its level of descriptiveness seemed secondary when compared to what we just witnessed on Pluribus. The experience of watching Pluribus and the experience of going on the internet and seeing the reactions to it were contrasting. On the internet, people were obsessed with figuring out what the mystery of the show was, whether the plot was thin, why Carol is so miserable, and several other things. On the other hand, the show itself was cut off from those concerns. I mean, it intended to answer some of those questions, but most importantly, it was obsessed with telling the story in a way that would ensure the viewers aren't just seeing and feeling, but also experiencing in a way that sort of feels visceral. So, despite the fact that there was a correlation between the questions viewers were asking and the answers the show was providing, it still felt like there was a disconnect between what people were watching and expecting to happen and what the show was actually doing. What is the show doing? You're an adult human being. Everything you know and have spent years imbibing about how being a human is supposed to be just suddenly stops being real. A virus takes over humanity and flips your reality in a moment. How do you live through that? That's the story Pluribus tells, and it does from a subjective perspective by visualizing every moment of these characters living through this reality and driving the plot forward solely based on the choices these characters make, the feelings they develop, and knowledge they gather, which means everything, everything we get to know about this new world is through the eyes of the characters involved. The main character is a very flawed human with many negative attributes that make her almost unbearable. And to cap it off, she lost love of her life during the joining. Yet, the majority of what we are going to learn is from her perspective, a distorted perspective, riddled with grief, confusion, frustration, anger, and many other human feelings. That's the character we're going on a ride with. This approach takes a show whose first 20 minutes made it look like we're about to watch a mystery filled drama and turned it into a character driven show with personal stakes. In essence, we are not watching a show where everyone is suddenly bound together by a psychic glue except 13 individuals. We are watching a show where 13 individuals have to figure out how to live in a world that still feels similar, yet completely different, with stakes that most of them haven't actually comprehended yet. So when we watch the character interact with the hive minds, and they say things like, "we is us," and they tell her that talking to an individual also means talking to every person on it, she get a sense of what's happening. And as a result, we get a sense of what's happening. But the gravity and absurdity of this new world did not actually hit home until we experience a moment where she lives through them. This level of descriptiveness is what Pluribus seeks to give the viewers. And what makes it admirable is not just because it commits to that objective without compromising at any point, but also because of how it constantly uses visual composition and camera movement to spotlight non-verbal reactions that makes this moment resonate.
Have I shown you, any of you, affection that was in any way unwelcome?
For us, affection is always welcome.
In the first episode, she learns three key things about the hive mind. One, they are unabashedly committed to ensuring she and other individuals are happy. Two, they don't seek to impose their will on them despite being the dominant group. Three, despite that they don't seek to impose their will on them, they are impelled to spread. And the ultimate aim is to ensure that everyone in the world becomes a part of this psychic bond. These three pieces of information create an ambivalent feeling that shifts between the character appreciating the hive mind's unrestrained commitment to making her happy and processing what the scary contradiction of them not imposing their will, but yet being compelled to spread really means. And the show takes us through this path over and over again. for as long as it takes her to figure out the underlying meaning of the world she is living in. Every character's perception of this world is shaped by who they were prior to the joining and how the joining affected them. Carol Stoker is a successful writer who believes she has the ability to write much more profound books than her successful ones. She was emotionally abused as a teen. She drinks a lot of alcohol. She's self-absorbed. She seems cut off from her family. And she lost the only person who loved her properly. So we know her perception of the world is different from Lakshmi's perception of the world. And immediately, we can see the candid difference between how she's dealing with the situation and how some of the other individuals are dealing with the situation. But the show doesn't try to paint this as a good or a bad thing. Whether I think of Carol as miserable or insociable during the phase when she aggressively reacted to the joining, or whether I think of her as lacking a sense of danger during the phase when she started flirting with her chaperone, the reactions you have are solely shaped by having experienced every moment the character has experienced. As a result, having your own visceral response. What the show just does is take us to the evolution of the character. It focuses on describing how each phase of our evolution develops, evolves, and then leads into another phase. We live through every moment that shaped those phases. We experience how confusion, grief, and distrust create a phase. Then we experience how isolation slowly leads to another phase. And then we experience how oversocialization slowly leads to the final phase. Finally, when she meets another character who is just starting the journey of actually making sense of this new world, we instinctively realize how far Carol and extensively we have come without the show having to spoon feed it.
You don't think it sounds wonderful? You don't ask them what it's like?
No.
How could you not ask them what it's like?
Have you even tried talking to them? You could learn a thing or two.
There's an episode in Pluribus titled The Gap, and I think that term is such a central idea to understanding the stakes and absurdity of the new reality Pluribus creates. From the subjective perspectives we experience in the first season, it feels like there are only two approaches to dealing with this reality for individuals who don't want to join their hive mind. We see this character making relationships and enjoying all the perks of the new world, while still maintaining his individuality. And during the early stages of the season, we see Carol ostracize herself from the hive mind because she believes the fundamental purpose of the joining contradicts what it means to be human. And later, we see another character that has the same belief. The difference between how we experience the perspective of Diabate and how we experience the perspective of Carol and Manusos really brings to life the gap between those extreme beliefs. Because despite the stakes and absurdity being the same for these individuals, they are living this new reality in a way that is opposite. And because of the show's uncompromising commitment to maintaining a subjective perspective and ensuring the representation of that perspective is as descriptive as possible, you get to experience this world in the same polarizing way. In this particular episode, we lead to the perspectives of two characters with quite similar beliefs as to how to exist in this new world. We watch them push this belief to the extreme under different circumstances. And at the end of the episode, we watch them compromise on that belief. And after that experience, we are left dealing with the gap between how they intend to live in this new world and how you're supposed to live in any world, the gap between their uncompromising individuality and the hive's unabashed collectivism. And just like they are making sense of this new world, we find ourselves also trying to make sense of this new world.
About a week ago, the undersecretary of I know you're all one. I get the basics. Anyway, all of you in the form of the undersecretary of you.
That dynamics is actually what Pluribus is exploring. That is why it feels so slow. Being able to put the viewer in a situation where every moment they watch is not just lived by the character, but also lived by them, to the point where they feel like a witness. That level of experience, that degree of immersion, is what Pluribus is trying to do. Every non-verbal reaction resonates, and every interaction with the hive mind is massive. In the world of Pluribus, the stakes aren't some mystery or ultra-scientific phenomena. Choosing to go with the girl instead of saving the world is high stakes. And this doesn't mean there aren't some objective stakes that the show will have to grapple with. There are, But this show is being driven by the characters. So whatever we get really is whatever the characters give us. And I think that is what makes Pluribus an extremely good television show. Do you share a similar perspective or do you have a different one? Let me know what you think in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I really can't stress how vital that split second act is. Thanks for watching.